Your AI coding assistant is only as good as the prompts that you give it. Most devs slam random prompts into the AI and wonder why they get mediocre code back. They then post their frustrations on Twitter, saying that AI sucks and never touch it again. This gives you, my young grasshopper, the opportunity to gap their skills due to their ignorance. I learned coding with AI just 2 years ago, and I'm already working with multiple clients on large-scale projects. One of the most important lessons that I've learned is how to document your code base properly for AI systems, so the work they do is both high quality and consistent. Today, I'm breaking down exactly how I set up my global cursor rules and my project-specific cursor rules that allow me to vibe code complex projects. This is my personal system that I use on a daily basis to write production level code that I then ship to clients. By the way, this also works with Claude Code, Klein, Windsurf, and any of the other AI IDEs. This is more so about the concept of AI coding. The biggest problem is that LLMs don't retain memory between chats. This means every time you prompt an AI to code for you, it's effectively restarting from scratch. If you don't provide efficient context, they're going to do random ineffective changes simply because they don't know what to do. So what exactly are cursor rules? They provide system level guidance for your AI assistant, essentially a persistent way to encode context, preferences, and workflows for your projects. These rules solve the AI's problem of having amnesia because they provide persistent, reusable context at the prompt level. I'm working on my project called Daybloom, which is a Next.js app that has a code base of about 500K tokens, meaning it's very, very big and very complex with a lot of working parts inside of it. If I didn't have these rules set up, I simply would not be able to work on the code base. It just would not work. The AI systems would make breaking changes all the time, and it would be ineffective to work with. With the process I'm about to show you, this fixes that problem. Cursor has two types of cursor rules. There are global rules, which apply to every single code base you work with, and there are project specific rules, which apply to specific code bases you're working with. To access the global rules, you can click the gear cog on the top right and go to the rules category. Now, to explain why rules work in the first place, you have to first understand how LLMs work. The way that LLMs work is they are essentially a giant library of information, but they can't access all of that information at once. So the words you use in a system prompt is what activates what I like to call these internal knowledge neurons for the LLM to access internally that helps it problem solve. In this case, I say you are an expert software developer. By saying this line, I theorize that it activates the software developer knowledge neurons it has just to help it improve, even just 1%, even a couple percent. It helps a lot. I then say to write concise, efficient code. Always comment your code. Never erase old comments if they are still useful. This is one of the most vital lines I work with because what this allows the AI system to do is to self-document and comment its code. By commenting code, it's automatically adding more context for future AI systems to reference and work with, which makes the future AI system's job a lot easier when it's working with these existing code that it has done in the past. I write commenting guidelines, so I make sure to structure everything in Markdown. This is the commenting guidelines section. I say to use clear and concise language, avoid stating the obvious, don't just restate what the code does, but focus on the why and the how rather than the what. Use single line comments for brief explanations and use multi-line comments for longer explanations or function/class descriptions. Now this line, insert comments are JS-Doc3 styled, tells the AI system to write comments in JS-Doc3 style, which is a specific style of commenting code, which is higher quality that our IDE is very comfortable and compatible with, which makes higher quality comments. I then say that for logging, we use Winston for logging. We should have a Winston logging modular file that we reference. Log every logical connection and workflow of the code base. Ensure a variety of the different logging levels depending on the workflow and logic. This dramatically improves, logging in general is good. This dramatically improves debugging and makes understanding your code base flow easier as complexity grows. I mostly just make sure we have a lot of logs because it makes debugging really easy. And again, what do logs do? Logs give the AI system more context for it to work with. So when it comes to debugging, the job of debugging is easier because you're pinpointing the exact problem. Now, I have a very interesting kind of gatekept thing I've used for the last 2 years, and these are competence maps. I use this in the GPT-4 days, and it has dramatically increased the quality of GPT-4. Now, models got a lot smarter since then, but I still keep it out of habit. And this falls under the same concept of using keywords to activate different knowledge neurons in the LLM. These are all just keywords related to software development and coding that seems to work. I just keep it here for good measure because why not? It worked in the past. Maybe it continues to work. Finally, I say the user has to manually give you code-based files to read. If you think you're missing important files, ask the user to give you the info before continuing. What this does is if I fail to provide context of a file that imports and reference another file that the AI doesn't know about, it'll say, hey, I need this file to work with it. So it's just a nice kind of safety net to catch proper context logging. Finally, I say don't be lazy. Write all the code to implement features I ask for. If I don't add this line and they give me half-ass code or pseudocode, I don't want pseudocode. I want the full thing. Don't be lazy. It actually works. I have this nice visual set up. Before we get into project rules, we need to address something critical that most tutorials don't cover. Your code base needs to be properly structured from the start. Rules only work as well as the architecture they're working with. If your code base is a disorganized mess, rules can't save you, but I'm so sorry. Here's the bare minimum that your code base should have. You could also tell your agent when you're initially vibe coding your project, so it keeps this in mind when it's building it. Your code must be modular with clear separation of concerns, no massive files. Any file that has more than 500 lines of code should be broken up into smaller modules. You should have consistent naming conventions for file names, functions, variables, and finally, a clear directory structure that logically groups related functionality does the world in making the job easier for AI agents as they're grepping and using tools to go through your code base. By having fundamentally good modular architecture, it makes vibe coding a much more reliable process, especially when you apply these rules. Because I have each of my files separate, when I ask the AI agent to work on a feature or a module, it knows to only target the files it needs to work with, nothing more, nothing less. This ensures the AI's output of code is high quality and consistent with the work base and allows it to really do work on our project. For Daybloom, which is the autonomous marketing platform I'm working on, this is how the code base is structured. We have our cursor rules files here. We have our documentation at root. We have our source folder with our components and each component nicely separated. Our hooks, our modules, that's just a really long individual module. We have our API under pages with all of the different API endpoints that exist. We have our schemas because this code base is written in TypeScript. We have our services, which act as utility functions that the APIs call and import. And our utility functions, which contain our authentication, contain the different utility files for the various functions we have in the code base down here, and our tests, and then normal project stuff, just for a visual reference of what the code base looks like. To get started with adding cursor project rules to your code base, you could hit Command Shift plus P on your keyboard. I'm on Mac, FYI. Then you could type in rule, and there will be an option to make a new cursor rule. You can then name this whatever you want. Name it what you're working with. For example, the side up tech stacks, like tech stack example, and hit enter. Now you have the entire cursor rule file that you could write inside of it. There are different rule types here. You could have always, auto attached, agent requested, or manual. To be honest, I only work with always. Every time I write something in the cursor rules, I want every single agent I have to always have a reference of the file. What's really nice about this is you could write whatever in here, but you could also add different files that you're working with, and that will give the cursor rules access to that file directly as well. I'm gonna now take you guys through a walkthrough of every single cursor rule I'm working with on my code base. The most important one to start off with is the tech stack. What the tech stack is it is a overview of all of the different frameworks and libraries that you're working with. If you do not tell the AI agents what frameworks you're working with, it's going to make you install random frameworks, even though you might already have a library you're working with that solves a problem. Again, context is everything. So in the tech stack cursor rule file, I explain that we are working with Next.js as a framework. We're working with TypeScript and Node.js as a runtime. Our front end is using Chakra UI for the UI library. For styling, we have Chakra UI style props, and we have our global styles in globals.css. We use Zoostand for state management. That is very vital and important, especially with our Next.js site. I explained that we use the React hook form and different modules for different components. For our API routes, we are just using Next.js API routes, which are located in src/pages/API. I explained that we use Superbase as our backend for our database interactions. We use Yup for API schema validation to prevent SQL injection attacks, as well as Winston for logging. And for testing, we use Jest. I then explained that we have these different components set up in the different service layers, and these are external APIs we're working with. The most important part of this is just explaining the massive libraries such as Shaker UI, Zoostan, Next.js, Yup, Winston, etc. That just makes sure that all of the code changes are completely aligned. This is the most critical cursor rules file you could add to your code base, and it will make your job a lot easier. The second most important cursor rule file that I have set up for every single project I work with is the project structure guidelines rule. This is an explanation of our current folder structure and where new additions should go. This is vital because it ensures that AI maintains our separation of concerns. In this file, you basically want to explain how your code base is structured, how the different modules are arranged and where they're arranged. In the case of a Next.js file, I tell it that all the React components for the front-end UI go in the src/components folder. All our modules go in src/components/modules. Our APIs and our services are both split up, where the API endpoint directly should go in src/pages/API. And those files should import utility functions from src/services. And that is how I maintain the separation of concerns in this Next.js project specifically. I then just explain where all the different other modules could go. This is very code base specific. Without this file, the AI might put code in unknown places and kind of make things up. But because we're giving it guidelines, when I ask it to create a new feature, it knows exactly where to go and where to add it to maintain our nice structured separation of concerns. So any additions it does, you don't even have to worry about it being right. It's going to be right off rip. Now for my favorite cursor rules file, the most famed argument against vibe coding is you're going to vibe code security issues into your code base, not if we set it up properly from the get-go. In our Next.js app specifically, we use Next.js authentication, and we have proper API utility functions made that set up the base of how API endpoints could properly authenticate our users, could access their own endpoints. We set up an entire authentication system here with different functions that our API endpoints are supposed to import. And we explain in this cursor rules guideline the API authentication and validation guidelines and how to properly use this. We explain the correct order of wrapping these functions, and we also give direct examples of how new API endpoints we create could hit these endpoints and how to import the files. There are different validation methods depending on the different API endpoints being used, and we explain that here. Again, this is project specific depending on the authentication systems you use, but as long as you set up proper authentication first, then explain how to use it in your code base throughout different features and modules and set this up, you don't gotta worry about security. You'll be set, bro. Now I'm gonna go through the rest of the cursor rules that we have set up for our code base, and I'm gonna just briefly explain why I like each one and why we set it up. I have our commenting guidelines, which explain how to properly comment code in our code base. I say to use JSDoc, which is a specific format of commenting code, and it just makes the comments really nice and pretty. It makes them look like this and sets up parameters with descriptions, which makes referencing them easier and also makes AI systems using this understand the code a lot faster. In this cursor rule file, I explain our essential hooks. For those that don't know React development, you could have these different hooks, which is how we could access different data models or UI states throughout the code base by explaining the most essential hook, which is use user data. This tells the AI systems how to access the current authenticated user's data to use in any functions or features we make. I have logging guidelines set up here. So this is a Next.js app. We have both server-side logging and client logging. This basically explains that we have a centralized logging utility file. And to access it, these are examples of how you import and use it, depending on if you're working with server files like APIs or client files like components. When it comes to adding new features in our app, there is a specific component that needs to be edited. to actually show the component on the front end, and that's our panel configuration. What that looks like in our app is all of these tabs on the side that you could click and go through. So when the AI agent makes a new feature, it should know to edit the panel config.tsx file so it automatically shows up here. Now this one's a little silly for our reasoning, but we have a Codebase styling guidelines which instructs the AI agents working with our code base exactly how to style the code it's making, and gives it very strict guidelines on how to style the code it's making to keep everything consistent. My homies and I actually took this from the Airbnb JavaScript style guide, which is a really nice guide on how to make high quality code. So I took this, I summarized it with an AI system, and I put it into our code base. So all the code that gets made is just nicely styled and nicely commented and follows all our cursor rules. Now I realized I'm actually missing one more important cursor rules file, and that is explaining to AI developers working with our code base how to access the different AI characters the user has access to. So what I did is I use repo prompt or repo mix to grab my entire code base that I'm working with, because it has a 400K token context window right here. That means it fits into Google Gemini, which has a 1 million context window. You could access Google Gemini at aistudio.google.com. And I asked, how can I best explain in the utility files MDC, which is this new file I just made, how to access the characters the authenticated user has, how to have a drop down for all the hooks the authenticated user has access to, and how to use the get character personality file to access the string data of the personality. I am basically asking Google Gemini to create my cursor rules files for me, and it did so. Very well done. I then added it to the utility file here, and that is how I easily and quickly create a cursor rules file that now every AI agent in the future will have access to. Now watch what happens when I put all of these beautiful project rules we just created together. You know what my product is missing? I have the ability to make an AI character, but I don't have a way to actually have a conversation with it. What if I go into my cursor and I simply just ask, I want to make it so I can chat with my AI characters on a drop down. Make this a new module. I'm going to intentionally be vague to see if just by prompting with all of these useful project rules, if it could create a new feature simply by me asking for it. Okay, it says it's done. It says, perfect, I've created a complete chat module for Daybloom that allows users to select AI characters from the dropdown and chat with them. Gives us a run through of what it implemented. Now, if I go to our site, you can see there's a new chat feature right here. I could click on it. I could select the characters available to me, and assuming I could chat to the model, if I send a message, oh, we get the message back. We have a nice little UI. We could talk back and forth with our different AI characters that exist on our site, so users could play with their own character. If you look at the code itself, we could see that it made a new module for us, nicely organized in the module directory. This is a result of creating these project structure guidelines. So it knew exactly where to make a new module. It knew how to make a proper chat API. And in the chat API, you can see at the bottom, it properly uses our authentication system we set up. And this entire new feature I added took 5 minutes and is perfectly aligned with our code base. As a result of documenting our code base for AI systems with the cursor rules file, you can see I was able to one-shot a completely new feature in less than 30 seconds by adding my idea and just waiting for the agent to code it. The result of this is we have every new feature follows or establishes patterns perfectly. I one-shot that, so development time for making that without this system probably would have taken a couple hours, and it took me 5 minutes. I could now focus on the creative part of making my program instead of getting hard stuck on different tech features. This impact is so dramatic, I now consider setting up the project cursor rules, the most important part of the vibe coding process. And just overviewing best practices, start with the tech stack. Be very explicit about the different libraries and frameworks you're using. Make sure you document your project structure so the AI knows where all your different modules and separated concerns lie. Make sure you define consistent patterns just so every AI agent that works with your code base stays 100% consistent. It's as if one single dev made this and not a bunch of different devs that have no idea what they're doing. And use examples liberally when you can. The more specific examples you could give the AI coding agents, the more likely their output will be exactly what you want. And make sure you update your rules as the project evolves. You don't want your rules to be outdated, so keep that in mind. You now have the secret to making AI produce genuinely production quality code with proper documentation and contextualization that is ready to ship. I have shown you exactly how I set up my cursor rules. Now it is your turn to implement this into your own projects and experience that same 100x productivity boost. If you guys found this video valuable, please subscribe to my channel. I am actively exploring AI and I have been for the last 2 years. So I love to share my insights and lessons as they come along so I can also help you guys achieve the same productivity gains that I have. If you guys have questions, drop them in the comments, please. I will answer every single one of them. For those serious about integrating AI into your business, whether it's setting up systems like this, building custom AI pipelines, and even training your staff on how to work with AI to be more efficient themselves, check out my consultancy at agency42.co. We make sure companies stay ahead of the curve with AI and make sure you guys remain irreplaceable in this new competition we're about to face. Finally, if you guys want to level up your game with other vibe coders, I have created a Vibe Coders Discord community where there are other people like yourself learning and actively sharing and helping each other in the chat. It is a growing community of next-gen devs, and I'm in there daily, and I love helping people on a deeper level who join the community. Links to everything are in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next insane AI video.